he was passed over, and people said, yes, he was very good. But they meant by that they were surprised how good he was. And they still preferred him to Superman. And that's a terrible thing that when that happens in a film. It happened in another film of ours, which was Mr. and Mrs. Bridge, in which Paul Newman played someone who was so utterly unlike Paul Newman's normal roles, and in a way so unattractive because he was it was just a kind of an American that people didn't want to know about. Actually, their stern grandfathers is who they didn't want to know about. Again, the same thing happened with Paul Newman, and it's an awful thing when all the glory went to his wife, Joan Woodward, who was indeed extraordinary, and she too got nominated for an Oscar. So when that happens, it's the saddest thing. But in any case, I don't want to talk about sadness particularly. I mean, it was. I just realized in watching it, it really is maybe in a way along with Mr. and Mrs. Bridge, absolutely the most American of my movies. I mean, as it should be. I really love watching it, not just because of the performers and there are, quite right, David, the dialogue is to die for. But just as a kind of an American, art object in a way. I mean, it couldn't help but being. I mean, with those locations, you're reminded constantly of the painter Winslow Homer. All sorts of things like that. That struck me about it as being so American. So I'm glad from time to time that I'm able to do that in my own country.
Thanks, James. I think absolutely right about Christopher Reeve. He sort of, when he's on the screen, he commands the screen, and you're forced to watch him. He's such a big physical presence, and he's really demands your attention. Has anyone got any questions for James? Yeah.
Within this retrospective of your film, so when you, among the audience, watch something that you have done, is it only the emotions or remembering of the circumstances of the shooting, or maybe you are able just to enjoy the film as we all do, or do you, as an author, a little bit at least recreate the film that is already made?
Well, when I watch my films, and particularly if it's been a long time since I've seen one, as with the Bostonians, I'm surprised sometimes at the things that I see and hear in them, and also sometimes in the themes. I seem to have been sometimes. I wasn't. I think to myself, well, that's what I was thinking then. That's what I was doing. They're kind of a. I'm surprised sometimes by certain issues that, not large issues like women's rights is in this film, but other kinds of things which are there, and I wasn't perhaps even aware of it at the time. And I just plunged in and did it, and in this case, of course, it was from a novel by Henry James, and I had very, very great help on that, and sometimes while I'm watching my films, I think, oh gosh, I mean, I wish I'd done that in a different way. For example, the very first shot of this film, I watched it and I thought, why the hell is everybody walking so slowly, and why is that carriage not going along faster? Why is it, it's like slow motion, why? In the first shot of a movie, so things of that side, you just can't help but think those kinds of things as you go along, but it's too late. And other times something happens that you see and you've totally forgotten about it, and you feel very pleased that you did that, and you don't remember doing it at all, but it just strikes you as being real. and real and your own, or my own. I made that. I did that. Nobody else did. Maybe someone else could have done it better, but they didn't, as far as I know. And I feel proud. But that's not to say that I'm 100% proud of every single frame of all my movies. I'm not. But I do have those feelings of satisfaction sometimes, and particularly when it's something unexpected.
Thanks very much, James. Any other question?
I do. I'm working again on an American film, and I'm also working on a Shakespeare play to make into a film. The play is Richard II, not the third. That's been done a lot of times. Richard II, and we're involved in that right now. And there's another project that we have based on two novels by an American novelist named Marilyn Robinson. One of which was a great success in the United States, the one called Gilead, which got the Pulitzer Prize, and then the other one is called Home, and we're putting those two novels together and going to make it into one film, rather as we did Mr. and Mrs. Bridge. That story is set in Iowa in the 1950s, but there are sections in it that go back to pre-Civil War and that kind of thing, but it's mostly set in the 50s. Now, I don't think of a film set in the 50s as being a period film, because in the 50s I was in my 20s, and I don't think that that I have to think about a film like set during my own lifetime and during my own adulthood as being a period film. So I'm not going to take anything from anybody when they say, oh yeah, one more period film. And this, of course, as far as Richard II is concerned, that is 14th century. Well, all right. That really is a period film. And those are the two things I'm working on at the moment.
Thanks. Another question? Yes.
Question you are probably asked all the time, film and literature. For example, maybe you can say how Kazuo Ishiguro's book came to your hands, how did you decide to make film?
Well, actually, I didn't really start working, making many films from books until later on in my career. The first films we made in India and the United States were mostly from original screenplays, and they were on contemporary subjects. And but then because of my interest in India, and my being there so long, and going back again and again and again over 20 years, more than 20 years, naturally I read A Passage to India, and that led to my reading other books by Forster, and I thought it would really be fun for me to do A Room with a View. And it was just, and that was the attitude about it. It wasn't that I felt this is a great work of literature and I have to do it. I mean, it is a wonderful work of literature, but it wasn't for that reason I did it. It was a story that I enjoyed, and I hadn't been to Italy, which is a country I love. I hadn't been there, again, for 20 years. That's where I made my first film, a documentary, and I hadn't been back to be in Italy for 20 years. And I thought, I can go and make a film in Italy, and I really want to do that. And so that really was the reason that we chose that particular Ian Forster book rather than, say, Heat and Dust, or, I'm sorry, Passage to India, or Howard's End, or anything else. It was simply to be back in Italy. Now, that's probably not a good reason for making a movie for most people, but that was my motive. And of course, the book was a very, very charming, interesting study of, the English abroad. That's a theme that we've taken up again and again, and I like taking it up, and I hope it's not for the last time I have taken it up. So, but a lot of the books just came my way. I mean, someone would leave for instance, my partner Ruth Jabala, our screenwriter, she may have been reading something, and she left it around, and I picked it up and I read it, and I thought, as with Quartet, and this is a book by Jean Reese. I thought this would make a wonderful film, and it was set in Paris in the 1920s, and Paris in the 1920s has always interested me. That's why we made Quartet, and as I said, it was completely casual, no plan, and also my partners had things they wanted to do. I mean, it was Ismail Merchant who really wanted to do Heat and Dust, and rather than Passage to India, he preferred to do Ruth's Jabbal's book Heat and Dust, and so we made Heat and Dust. He decided that. It was Ruth who said, after we had made A Room with a View and Maurice, well, you know, there's a real mountain to climb. If you really want to, you really want to do a great book, or a great Forster novel, there is the most wonderful one there in Howard's End, and why don't we try and climb that mountain? It won't be easy, but why don't we try and do it? So we did. But the whole thing has been quite, I don't know, casual and not a planned thing at all.
Thanks, James. I'm going to butt in here with a question of my own. You mentioned Ruth Jubbal and your collaboration with her. I wonder if you could say a little bit more about, excuse me, about that, and about how you approach a script in particular. Do you like a script to be perfect before you start filming? Do you adapt as you go along? Just a little bit about that collaboration.
Right. Well, I met Ruth because Ismail had read her fourth novel, which was called The Householder. Somebody had given it to him when he was living in Hollywood as a very young would-be producer, and someone had given it to him and said, it was actually a scriptwriter from MGM, and said, why don't you make this into a film? And he read it, and he'd never read anything of Ruth's. I had never read anything of Ruth, though she was, by that time, she'd done 4 novels, and she was published in the New Yorker magazine all the time. And so we decided it was a novel we thought we could make for a relatively small amount of money in India. And so we approached her, and we said, we wanted to buy the rights, or at least take an option on them and try and raise the money for it. And we wanted her to write the screenplay, and she said, well, I've never written a screenplay. I don't know anything about writing screenplays. And but we had to say, well, Ismail had never produced a feature film, and I'd never directed one. So we were all in the same boat, and we just started out. And for all the years that we were together, we've always trusted each other's judgment and not gotten in each other's way. And I mean, I left Ismail alone to do what he needed to do. He's always left me to do what I had to do. I've not really interfered very much in what Ruth had to do, but obviously with the screenplay, the director does get very involved. And it's not, when you start out with the screenplay, you hope that it's all there, but you soon find it isn't all there, and you have to make all kinds of changes and add new material and make cuts that you weren't expecting to make and so forth in the screenplay. But sometimes she and I write a screenplay together, and that's a different thing. When we work like that, I write my draft first, and then she takes it, and she works from my draft and doesn't really go back, if it's an adaptation, she doesn't really go back to the book very much. She works out of my draft, and that's what she uses as the basis of her version of it, and then eventually the two are put together, and you have a screenplay, which is a real sort of shared thing. But normally, in most of the cases, she has written the screenplay herself. Sometimes I've been thousands of miles away. I had no idea what she was doing. I didn't see the screenplay for months and months and months. I had no idea. It's not like she sent pieces of it to me to look at and get my opinion. It was never like that. She would finally finish something and give it to me, and then that was my first read of it. And then we would work on it together a bit to change this and that, and because the director can imagine difficulties that the screenwriter can't imagine sometimes, and you have to prepare for those and get rid of things which you see would be impossible to do, or too costly or whatever, or you just don't like. But eventually you do start out shooting with something that is more or less what what you want to do. But it's really like a blueprint of a house more than anything.
Thanks very much. Another question?
I'd like to know if you have anything important in this part of the family, anything left to make a film.
Well, I mean, I haven't. I've only been in Croatia since Tuesday, though I was here a long time ago. I don't really know Croatia, but that doesn't necessarily mean I wouldn't do a film here. I didn't know China when I went to make The White Countess, and I certainly didn't know Argentina when I went to make City of Final Destination. So I'm like, who knows? I mean, let's see. I might turn up one day. Well, that really would be harder to do. I mean, I think there's such a long cultural history here, and such a rich cultural history, and it's so linked to so many other cultures, rather like India in a way. I'd be a little wary of working here until I really felt that I knew what I was doing.
Yeah, my question is actually the movie Remains of the Day is for me probably one of the 10 best movie I saw in my life. And I have just question how you get an idea to get that kind of movie, because looks to me really hard to make it. And what you think about acting of Anthony Hopkins, because for me personally it's probably the best acting I never saw in my life. Mm-hmm. Even beginning from that British brilliant players from Charlie Chaplin to today Daniel Lewis, probably Anthony Hopkins is still for me the best actor on the world, and I believe it's probably the best acting in his lifetime. That acting is in your movie. Thank you.
When we took up Remains of the Day, he was in a way already involved in it, because he'd read the book. Someone had given him the book to read, and he. The rights had been taken by Mike Nichols, and Harold Pinter wrote a script, and they were talking about making that into a film, and with Sony, and the opera knew that, and I told them right away I would be very interested in playing that butler. And then there was a dispute between Mike Nichols decided he didn't want to make it, and Harold Pinter sort of got busy with other things, and we took over because, but he was there. He was already there. He was, in my mind, I had just worked with him in Howard's End. He'd been wonderful in Howard's End, and it was our next movie, and Remains was the next movie after Howard's End, and I just wanted to work with him again because he was so splendid in Howard's End, I thought, and he was eager to do it. And when you have an extraordinary star like that, and meanwhile he got the Academy Award, so that made him, from a marketing standpoint, much more desirable star for that film, which was not an easy film to put across. I mean, it was it's not, as a story, it's not something that a lot of people probably who make films and finance films would find very attractive. But anyway, he was there and solidly there, and I agree about his work in that film. I've not seen anything that he's done since then that I liked better, and I've worked with him 2 more times since then. We made Surviving Picasso with him, and then very recently we made City of Final Destination. But I've seen a lot of other things that he's made, and sometimes he has to play an animal, or he has to play some terrible kind of murderer, or something. He doesn't. Obviously, he's an actor. He wants to work, and he has to work. But I certainly would prefer to see him in something like Remains of the Day.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
And there's been other films that he's made where he did not play an animal, and which are very good.
I also agree with you about Anthony Hopkins' performance. That leads me to a question that I'd like to ask you, James, about how you approach directing actors. Because you've coaxed brilliant performances out of so many actors. What's the technique? Do you have to use different techniques for different And how do you approach that generally?
Well, when you work with great actors like Anthony Hopkins or Vanessa Redgrave, for instance, they're consummate artists, and you have to imagine that you have to let them think about and develop the character on their own. I mean, you can't tell them to do every single thing or to develop every possible emotion. You have to let them kind of bring it up from, I don't know how they do it. It's a mystery to me how actors prepare. I really don't know. But I know it's a very long, introspective kind of preparation, which is based somewhat on experience, but it's also based on their memories, on people they knew. It's rather, as I think when an author creates fiction, they're drawing on so many different sources, and I think actors do that too. So I wait for the actor to show us what it is he or she wants to do as prepared, which comes out in the very first time we start rehearsals. And then you know, usually you know, that you've got something pretty good. Once in a while, they prepared something that you don't quite like or you think needs a bit of adjustment. It's rare that an actor comes up with something that's totally wrong. And you have to start from scratch. Now, sometimes with very young actors who are talented but haven't done much, that they have to be nursed along a bit. And I have this, it's not a theory exactly, but I feel that actors are, as artists, they're deep but narrow. And I feel that directors are wide but shallow. And you need this combination to get a good performance. So that's the way I pretty much work.
Thanks very much. Another question? Yeah. Slavka.
So we have to close our meeting today. The young filmmakers and some other are coming in 5 minutes. So I would like to thank Mr. Ivory for this and for his arrival, and to give him his final speech to the audience. And I can promise that when he makes his next film, I will do everything possible to show it in Pula to you.
I just want to again thank you and the festival, and I've had a great week here. It's been a lot of fun, and I've enjoyed myself, and I would certainly come back in a flash if there was something you want to see. So, for sure. Thank you.